Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to do some cut testing on the old Winterblade Factor. This is the B3 model. I actually was fortunate enough to receive this from Brian to do a review on the channel. You will find that review up here towards the top of the screen. Fantastic knife. Originally, these came out, I think, in 2023, and by the end of 2023, this was more or less everyone's favorite knife of the year for pretty much all channels. Then in 2024, he followed up with a larger version and a couple other variations of more or less the same thing. This is a fully magnet-driven knife, in case you've never seen one of these before. So there are at least 4 magnets in here. So the blade release tab here is a magnet. There are magnets under here and here. This is held in by a magnet. There's another magnet. There's a couple of magnets on both sides of this thing. So the detent is all magnet. There's no detent ball whatsoever. You will see this knife never bounces out. This is the knife that goes ting, if you can hear that. Fantastic. Just an all-around awesome knife. This does come, though, in an M390 steel. Where's my M390? Here it is. It's actually very light writing on the blade there. This is, of course, a real deal one. This is not a knockoff or a replica. So M390 steel, if you notice, have been paying attention, we just reviewed a couple of other M390 knives, the 𝗚𝗚𝗦𝗧𝗏 and 223. Also in M390. So I wanted to do this one fairly close to those so that would be still relatively fresh in my mind to see how those performed. And of course, I would expect at least as much, if not even more, out of this knife. I did just resharpen, kind of reprofile the blade. It did come with about a 22-degree angle, and I have knocked that down to an 18-degree angle on this thing. It is cutting like a laser beam. So if you haven't watched my sharpness tests before, this is nothing official or formal. I have my own redneck cutting scale, which goes from a 1, which is cuts like a spoon, to a 10, which is this thing makes a katana look like a butter knife. So this is not extremely objective. I try to get close in about the same amount of inches or square inches of cardboard and rope and rubber hose, etc. But this is just really for my own personal use. I'm getting a personal sense and feel. There's obviously a lot of subjectivity, although I'm trying to keep it relatively fair between tests. So that's what you're going to get here. If you would, before we get too far, down below here, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe and notification bell. Even if you don't ever see my videos, that really helps little guys like me on the YouTubes. Throw me a thumbs up, man. Before you leave, go ahead and do it now if you want. That way you don't forget. Again, I can't thank y'all enough for doing that. It's been really cool to see the feedback from everybody. So again, I have a full review on this knife. I'm not going to do a full review again here. M390. This is a 60 to 61 HRC range. I'm pretty sure that came straight off of Brian's site. He does not have these B3s. B3 being basically the version 3 model, which is full titanium. This is titanium on both sides. And that was the B3 editions. Those are done with now. I don't know if he's going to come out with a B4 or not. I know he's working on his other models right now and just recently had a launch. So if you were looking or waiting to get in, man, you need to go check his website because he just launched a bunch, and as soon as he puts them up, they sell out. But you can even pre-order them there on his site. I'll put a link down to his site below if y'all want to go check him out. Really good dude. Okay, so again, just because I finished testing the 𝗚𝗚𝗦𝗧𝗏 and 223, both in M390, and those performed exceptionally well, I wanted to kind of follow up quickly with this one so I can test my third really well-known M390 steel to see how this one does. Again, I resharpen it down to an 18-degree. This knife overall is about 7 1/8 inch long, not too big. It's got about a 2.5 inch cutting edge on it. The blade itself is 125 thousandths, so a little on the thinner, slicier side. Now this thing is a 12 1/1000ths behind the edge, so really slicey. Handle is a little less than a 1/2 inch thick. We're going to see how that does. 3.8 ounces is the weight. In case you haven't seen these, we'll do a few quick comps on the sizes just to get your bearings on this thing. This is a relatively small, it's a 7-inch knife, EDC knife. You can see 𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗏 much bigger, even the old bug out is bigger. We'll throw a couple of Spydercos. Everybody pretty much knows the size of the PM2 and the Para 3, so let's just for size reference let you see that. You can clearly see this is smaller than even the PM3, although very close to it and roughly about the same amount of cutting edge on this blade. A couple other comps, which really I think is the category I put this knife into, which is going to be the old 𝗙𝗰𝘁𝗿𝗃 as well as the Rosie. Both of these all have this forward finger choil placement, which shortens the blade. They all have anywhere from 2.5 to 3 inches in cutting length, but roughly the same size category. Nice knives that you can choke up on, and I think those are all good. By the way, I've got cutting tests coming up on those knives next. All right, let's talk about the ergonomics. It does have this large forward finger choil, which I am a big fan of. Kind of a 𝗪𝗡𝘂𝘁𝗍𝗃 style blade, which I am also a big fan of. Great for easy draw cuts like that. You can certainly choke up as I'm cutting the cardboard. You will watch, I will be probably in this position right here. You can also choke back. I have a size large glove, and you can see easily fit all 4 fingers. Even larger hands would easily fit. Here's the one area on the ergonomics I do not know about. When it comes to hard cutting into that wooden board that we're going to test on, what I have found was even with the 𝗚𝗏81 and 223, just the compression lock cutout, after a while, when you're really squeezing down on that, that's going to get hard on your hands. So I think these are likely to hurt a little bit when I get to that hard cutting test. We'll see in just a minute about that. Otherwise, it's a fairly neutral shape. You could easily reverse, pull it, push cutting it. This is not made for a hard use all day long kind of hard work knife, you know. This is a great thin, slicey, beautiful, cool EDC knife that is kind of a one-of-a-kind and has a fantastic sound. That's this knife's place in life, but I do think it's going to do really well. I expect it to do well on not only the cardboard, but also the hose and the rope, the sisal rope. We did resharpen it, as I mentioned, down to an 18 degree, and this thing is a laser beam. Just clean through everything. It doesn't get much better than that, so we are definitely starting at a 10 out of 10 on the old redneck sharpness scale. So with that in mind, let's dive in, go see how this thing will do. All right, so as usual, we're going to cut about 400 square inches of cardboard. One of these days, I may actually count the strokes. I'm going to use the normal choked up with the finger choil. I've left this first piece of cardboard at normal speed. This is not sped up at all. Just wanted you to be able to see how fast and easy this knife just tears through this cardboard. This is the proverbial hot knife through butter in this piece of cardboard. Really easy to cut, passes through without a problem. Just no issues whatsoever. Feeling really good. But you know, we've done that with a whole lot of knives, and that doesn't mean that the edge is going to hold up. That's really what we're ultimately looking for. Although I'm also looking for a bit of ergonomics and how easy is it to chop up cardboard. You know, it's one of the main things we all tend to do with our knives. So it's a good test. Plus, it almost always has an impact. Just even this much of cutting almost always has an impact. But this is still slicing from start to finish all the way through, clean, easy, no problem. That reprofiled edge makes a big difference. So let's see if we've actually done any damage to the edge here. I'm just checking it to see if I've got any tape or residue or anything on there. First cut, here we go. Look at that. That is as smooth and clean and easy through that paper as any knife. You know, I'm trying to go slow, make sure I get from tail to tip of that blade, just to see if there's any snags whatsoever. And of course, we hit nothing. So this is one of the best knives, certainly after that test. But we've got more tests to go. So with the rubber hose, I'm really looking to see if this will cut, kind of almost push cut. Just can I push it literally through that hose and get a good clean cut, or am I going to have to saw? It's a pretty thick nylon reinforced in the inside of this rubber hose, and as you can see here, just takes a little bit of elbow grease, but that knife you can basically just push clean through, makes a nice clean cut at the end of the hose. And the shape of this blade allows you to get the whole blade down. It's almost like a food prep knife, and so you could even imagine how this might do chopping up carrots or onions or something like that out at your campsite for dinner. Let's see if that has any effect on the paper. And again, we see nothing. Beautifully, cleanly through. I mean, this is still pretty much what I would call a 10 on most of my pocket knives. I mean, like at this stage, if I did that not testing a knife, I probably wouldn't even strop it at that point. I'd be like, okay, good to go. So again, with the rope, the sisal rope, I'm looking to see, can I basically push this thing all the way through that rope? And as you can see, it is popping cleanly through the rope. Again, I think absolutely that new 18-degree edge made a big difference in how easy it is to push cut your way through this sisal rope. One of the easiest, if not certainly the best performances on that rope, but did it do any damage to the edge? That's always the question. And again, that was me just kind of sliding out of the cut there. The knife itself, there's not a single snag on this knife yet from tip to tail. So this is absolutely the best performer that has maintained a 9 to 10 rating all the way through all three of these tests. Pretty shocking. Obviously very happy with that result. Let's see how it does ergonomically. This is where, I'm really concerned that top of the knife where it's open for that kind of funky flipper tab may start binding into my hand. Right now I'm choked forward, my finger in that choil, thumb at the back of the blade, just to see how that feels. And is it biting down into the wood? Feeling pretty good. Now I'm going to go to just the regular hammer style grip. That almost allows you to grip it harder and push even harder. Now I'm kind of digging deeper into the wood here, get some good deep cuts into the wood, but now we got to see how does it feel in the hand. So this is where I'm realizing, yeah, the opened end of the back of that handle will dig into you. If you're really gripping and pushing into that knife, that's not a very good place to grip it. So I can see why they came out with those filler tabs. If you're kind of using this with your knife in that method, that filler tab in the back would be good. So now I move back to the forward finger choil area just to see how that feels. Because what I'm kind of noticing is when you're choked forward on the knife, that's not nearly as bad as when you're choked back on the knife. So that's what I'm trying to tell you here. When I'm choked up, it feels okay. If I'm choked back, it's not quite so good. It's that knife is kind of digging into the top of my hand there. Otherwise, pocket clip, no issue at all. No other ergonomic issues. And it bit into the wood really good. So let's see if that did any damage to the edge of our blade. And this is just me sliding out of the cuts, not holding the paper right. There are no snags, as you're about to see here. So at this point, again, after all of our tests, this thing is still cutting like a 9 or a 10. There are no snags in the blade. That thing is just passing through the paper cleanly and easily. I'm kind of surprised. The last knife I tested, that 𝗏𝗏𝗁𝗏𝗏 replica, it did pretty well, but not this good. This is still easily a 9 or a 10. Don't know why. Not sure you really need to, but you might as well go ahead and strop it. I don't even strop it that much, I think, here. I think I do my normal 3 or 4 passes per side, and then I think I end up doing a dozen passes on each side of the knife, just because, hey, I just put it through some pretty hard use tests, and before I put my knife away, I'd like to go ahead and strop it up and put it away nice and clean and sharp, right? So let's see. I mean, you kind of know what's coming. It was already a 9 or a 10. All I can do now is get it back to an absolute guaranteed 10. And you can see we're back to laser beam status here. I'm just having fun cutting. When a knife cuts that smoothly, it's beautiful. So yep, we made it back to a 10. Very little effort on the stropping. So let's now take a look at our big picture results and see how this one compared to the rest of the knives. All right, so again, I always know this is probably impossible to see unless you're looking at this on a big screen TV or maybe a giant computer monitor, but our Winterblade Factor down at the far right of the test results. These are all the knives that we've tested so far, and we'll go down through here. I'll read it off. Obviously, this is an M390 steel. We're 60 to 61 HRC. The Knife Steel Nerds rate M390 as a 6.5 on their little charts, their comparison charts. I did sharpen this knife first, as I mentioned, it down to an 18-degree edge. I think that had a big help in how the knife performed here today. Started as a 10 out of 10, no problem. Just under 400 square inches of cardboard, very similar to what we've done on all the other knives. Almost nothing. I mean, nothing I could really notice. Still a 9 or a 10 on edge after the cardboard. Did our 3 hose cuts, still a 9 or 10. Did 11 rope cuts, normally do 10. It was still a 9 or 10. No snags anywhere. Went through the wood cutting and testing, still a 9 or a 10. At no point did that knife get certainly below a 9, and in most cases, as I mentioned throughout the test, I probably wouldn't even have stropped this knife normally. If I'd have picked this up and felt it this sharp and it cut through paper like that, I'm like, okay, this knife is great. It's good to go. Did strop it back, and of course that got us to an absolute laser beam 10. Again, just like we started the test with. Clearly, this is one of the best performing knives that we've had. It's interesting that they've all kind of worked out this way, almost like going from worst to best over these, I don't know what this is, 8 or 9 or 10 different tests now. That almost nothing that we did here in this test affected this blade edge at all. This certainly appears to be a harder HRC rating, more hard of an M390 than what we saw on the 2 different OKK knives. And I kind of expected that would be the case as well. I think I mentioned that back in those tests. Those felt like M390, but probably on the softer side, maybe a 58, 59, maybe a 60. I definitely think this one would be at least a 60 or a 61, and that certainly makes sense with how well it held up throughout the test. I do think that 18-degree edge made a big difference in our cutting test. It's like every knife that I have sharpened has done really well on the test. So I think one of the things we can take away is that a factory edge is rarely going to be the edge that's going to give you the best performance out of probably almost any knife. Now, the one exception to that was the 𝗏𝗏𝘁𝗍𝗏 replica, which I tested last time, and it killed the test. I mean, it never went below a 9 on all of those tests. I did not sharpen that, but you got to think about kind of the backstory of where that came from. The whole source and the manufacturer, the guy who made it, kind of says that they're doing their own sharpening and they go above and beyond to deliver better than a factory grind. You know, take that with what it is, with a grain of salt. There's all kinds of replica knives that are crap, just pure crap. I just got lucky, I think, on that one. But all the other ones that were where we had, in fact, sharpened them, all performed really well on this test. This one was no exception either. I'm just not sure how any knife would do any better on these tests. I mean, I have to now, in light of all the tests that we've done, this is clearly a 10 out of a 10. There's no knife that has performed as well as this. Close, real close, but not as good as this one. This is our new best performance standard. The only other thing I would comment on would be the ergonomics of the knife. So, as I mentioned when we were cutting the wood there, that big hole, that opening on the back side of the handle where that flipper tab goes down to, you know, launch out the knife, the little launch flipper tab. I understand now why they make carbon fiber inserts. You can basically delete the flipper tab, and in its place you put in a carbon fiber wraparound insert that basically fills that whole back end of the knife and makes it feel like one consistent handle all the way through. If I had to do a lot of kind of hard cutting with this knife, and I don't know why you would, unless you just really had a job that required you to do that, I would probably pick a different knife than this one. This is, you know, your EDC, thin, slicey, fun, cool looking, cool sounding, fun to show off kind of a knife. Not what I would consider, you know, like my hard use work knife that I would want to take to a job where I had to do a lot of hard cutting. I can think of a whole lot of better knives ergonomically. But I do get it and understand it, and you definitely will feel that if you're going to use this knife cutting that way in hard cuts. As I mentioned, if you choke up into that forward finger choil, it's actually not as bad. It just moves that opening more to the kind of the gap in the palm of your hand, so you don't feel it quite as bad. Just pointing out those things for what those are worth. I mean, ergonomics is a factor, and you know, we're all paying attention to it. No pun intended there. I probably have said factor now a dozen times. Didn't even think about it until now. At any rate, this thing performed outstanding. Here's a picture of all the other knives on the screen that you can see what their overall rating scores were. Some of those have been downward graded after not today's test, but the last few tests. Now that I can really get a good feel of worst to best, I did upgrade or downgrade some of those tests accordingly. And, you know, just have to keep that going. This is all a relative thing. It's not like some absolute objective score. This is how well does this knife compare to that knife. That's what these tests are all about. So I hope you enjoyed today's test. If you got any suggestions for me, I'm always all ears. I'd love to hear it. Don't hesitate to reach out. Let me know what you think down in the comments. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Hit that notification bell. Really helps me out. I appreciate that. Throw me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think, or if you have any great ideas. Otherwise, thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care.